Welcome to Fact/Fiction. In each episode, you'll be presented with a series of both well-known and obscure urban legends and modern-day folklore. Your task is to decide whether the stories are fact, fiction, or inconclusive. Each episode will also feature a special guest, and at least one story will be inspired by or written and submitted by a subscriber. Details of how to submit your own tall tale for consideration can be found in the description below. So let's begin, shall we? Essie came back from the dead. In 1915, Essie Dunbar from South Carolina passed away following what was believed to be a severe epileptic seizure. Essie's funeral was arranged to take place the very next day, and at 11 AM, family and friends gathered to say goodbye to Essie, who was just 30 years old at the time. However, Essie's sister, as a result of the hurried funeral and short notice, was still travelling to the cemetery, and having arrived late, begged to see her sister one last time to say a final goodbye. The funeral had been a long one, as 3 preachers were invited to lead the service, and the coffin had not yet been fully buried, and as a result, Essie's sister's request was granted, and the coffin was dug out, lifted from the grave, and the lid carefully opened. But Essie, who had been formally pronounced dead just the previous day by a qualified doctor, sat up in her coffin and greeted her sister with a welcoming smile before stepping up out of the coffin. The preachers, who were terrified by what they saw, stumbled and fell into the now open grave, whilst the mourners, including Essie's sister, fled in terror. Essie lived a further 40 years before passing away for the second time in 1955, at the age of 70. However, this time, she didn't come back.
The Kamikaze Killer. In 1976, the small Spanish town of Cudillero was plagued by a serial killer. Whilst there were no obvious links between the victims, they were all tourists staying in the local area, and coroner's reports stated that in all cases, the cause of death was strangulation, based on the deep indentations and bruising left on the victims' throats, believed to have been caused by a length of metal tow cable. Armed with these facts, police were able to begin building a profile of their killer, and while the only pieces of evidence linking the murders appeared to be the method and disposal, it soon came to light that all victims were last seen at a small local bar in town called El Pecado. Police questioned all of the employees at El Pecado, and by November of the same year, they had made their first and only arrest, taking into custody the bar owner, Antonio Garcia. Following a heavily detailed confession, Garcia was eventually charged with the murders of all victims, and as usual, the press were eager to hear his story. Why would Garcia, whose bar was highly successful and popular with both tourists and locals, turn to murder? He explained that he had been visited in a dream by an angel that told him he was to be trusted with a divine task. Garcia was to assist tortured souls into the afterlife, where they could finally be free of their woes, and that he would recognize those that needed his help by what drink they would order at his bar, specifically a kamikaze cocktail. In a trial lasting 2 months between January and February of 1977, Garcia was sentenced to multiple life sentences for the murders, which he would serve in a secure psychiatric hospital with no chance of parole, and he would eventually be dubbed by the Spanish media as the Kamikaze Killer.
The Bunny Man photo. Around 2010, a photograph emerged online depicting a terrifying scene. The disturbing image shows the body of a young woman being dragged into what is assumed to be an abandoned building by a raggedy dressed man wearing a giant bunny mask. The woman's face appears obscured, and it's unclear as to whether she had been beheaded or mutilated beyond recognition. A photograph, which was discovered in a dumpster in Georgia in 1982, was examined by local law enforcement and the FBI, who confirmed that they believed the photograph was real, and a full investigation was carried out to uncover the location of the image. Despite their best efforts, the FBI has so far neither located the building or the body, and no credible leads as to the identity of the woman or her killer have ever been established. The case remains open to this day.
The body under the bed. In 1991, a couple were vacationing in Las Vegas, Nevada, and had checked into the lavish Excalibur Hotel. Upon entering their room, they noticed an acrid smell and, unable to locate the source, demanded to switch rooms to escape the foul odor. The receptionist informed the guests that unfortunately all rooms were fully booked for the night, but they could try again in the morning. The couple were understandably unhappy with this news, having paid a lot of money for their suite, but decided they would try their luck again in the morning and did their best to ignore the smell. The next day, the couple again approached the reception, this time informing them that the smell was not only still there, but much worse. Again, the couple were informed there were no available rooms to switch, but were reassured that the housekeeping would be sent to provide a full clean of the room and hopefully locate the source of the smell. The couple, somewhat defeated, left to try and enjoy their day. They were on holiday after all, but upon returning to the hotel later that evening, they were greeted by a police officer who informed them that they couldn't enter the room and that their luggage had already been moved to a different hotel where a luxury suite had been booked courtesy of the Excalibur. The couple were grateful for the upgrade, but were curious as to why they had received the sudden VIP treatment. The officer explained that other guests had reported the smell, and whilst housekeeping were cleaning the room, a grisly discovery had been made. While vacuuming under the bed, the housekeeper had run over what felt like a piece of material, which immediately blocked the hose of her vacuum. Worried she had damaged a piece of the guest's clothing, the housekeeper bent down to investigate, and to her horror, discovered her vacuum had sucked up the clothing of a decaying corpse of a young woman who had laid undiscovered for several days.
The Halloween Massacre of 1962. In 1962, a Halloween party took place that no one would ever forget. Dressed in a black mask, the unidentified killer had locked all the doors from outside the property before climbing back inside to begin his terrifying killing spree. Armed with a large kitchen knife, the killer set to work and slaughtered 7 victims before fleeing the property and disappearing into the night. The killer to this day has never been identified, and immediately after the incident, the only clues as to the identity of the masked murderer was a single photograph taken minutes before the attack, where the killer can be seen sat in the centre, staring directly at the camera with a menacing grin stitched to the front of the mask, fully aware of the horror he is about to unleash. The mask, which was found 7 years later in 1969, currently resides with the original photograph in an FBI evidence store, while the case itself remains unsolved to this day. Whilst it is believed that Essie Dunbar was a real woman, the facts and evidence surrounding the events of 1915 are poorly documented and largely based on second-hand accounts of the incident, most of which were recorded many years after the alleged event occurred. And with no remaining living witnesses or concrete evidence, the legitimacy of this story will remain a mystery.
Whilst the picturesque fishing town of Cudillero in Spain is real, Antonio Garcia, the El Pecado Bar, and the Kamikaze Killer are all entirely fictional, and this story is in fact not an urban legend, but was inspired by a subscriber, Creepy Megan.
Thankfully, this story is fiction. The photograph is taken from a 2010 series of photographs known as the Poppyfield Gang, and is the work of photographer and director Elliot Lee Hazel. Much like the photograph from the legend, the Poppyfield Gang series is a somewhat disturbing collection. However, the allegedly dead female, who is actually wearing a rooster mask, can be seen in many other photos alongside the bunny-headed man, and is not only very much alive, but is also a consenting and active participant in the photo shoot.
While this exact story is fictional, at least 9 real-life incidents have occurred where the bodies of murder victims have been discovered both underneath hotel beds and inside the box storage area under the mattress after guests had reported foul-smelling odors coming from either their room or adjacent rooms. And it is likely that the origin of this urban legend is based on the details of one of these very real incidents.
Thankfully, no murders of this kind were reported on Halloween in 1962, and the FBI have no open cases relating to this story. And as for the photograph depicting the masked killer, it's nothing more than a somewhat disturbing vintage image of a Halloween costume party. So how did you do? Do you know your kamikaze killers from your bodies under the bed? Leave a comment below with your score out of 5, and make sure you keep your eyes peeled for more fact/fiction very soon.